All right, guys, we're going to get started with this meeting. For the Zoom recording, starting the meeting in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right, we're going to call the Complete Street Safety Committee meeting, first one for 2026, to order at 6:35 p.m. May I get a roll call? Paul?
Here.
Christian?
Here.
Raymond?
Here.
All right, I'm here. May I get an adoption of the agenda for today?
Make a motion to adopt the agenda.
Thank you. And I get a second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any general public comments that are not on the agenda items?
No one in the Zoom meeting. Chris, I did receive an email from you. I don't know if you wanted to touch on that, or if I did forward to the committee the correspondence you sent just before the meeting. I was wondering if you wanted to touch on that or on the email you sent earlier.
Yeah, no, as long as you have it as background.
Okay.
I just have a kind of quick thing.
Okay.
Best wishes for the new year, everyone.
You too?
Happy New Year.
Occasionally, I'm not religious about it, I drop in and I review the police blotter, and I have noticed collisions being reported on. There was a bike and an automobile collision on Sierra Point within the last 6 months, I think it is. And I think I've mentioned this before, but one thing that I think would be helpful is, and it doesn't need to come from the police department, it can come through Public Works, but that a presentation, anytime that there's a collision involving two cars in the city, cars and a pedestrian, cars and a bike, that you get to see that, you get to see what the situation was, because it would be really valuable if we just didn't presume it's an accident and actually looked to see what about the situation could be improved on and prevent that from happening again. Thanks.
Thank you. Great suggestion. Anyone online?
No.
No? Okay. May I get a motion to approve the minutes for the December 3rd, 2025 meeting?
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
May I get a second?
I second the motion.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, old business. We're going to continue our discussion on the proposed Visitation Avenue survey and improvements. Tomas sent over and included some information on the raised crosswalk. So thank you to Tomas and anyone else who helped put that together. That's helpful. Tomas, or Maz, do you want to give us highlights on this, or do you want to?
Yeah, so I guess this meeting is really just an opportunity to, kind of hash out this recommendation, finalize it, talk about it once more if that's what we want to do, because we did ultimately want to get this to the city council again in the early new year. I do have the old one, just the old agenda report, just kind of as a refresher. So essentially, we're going to resend this to council, finalize this report, and really just make sure we're all on board and agree with the recommendations. And yeah, it's an opportunity for you guys if there's any questions or concerns or anything, any last minute additions, the floor is open for that.
Paul?
Well, we were going to talk about the cost of a project like this today, as opposed to, I think it was 2013 that the original costs were based on, the estimate.
So there's information in the raised crosswalk that says that the fees associated generally range from about $7,110 to $30,880 each, with an average cost of about $8,100. That's just for the raised crosswalk. Are you wanting them to also put together an estimate on the cost on the painting and striping?
No. That I believe that cost was based on one of the references, the third reference down. Back in, can you make that a little bigger, please? 2013. Yeah. Right here, Bushnell on references.
Right, and then this document right here is from 2018. So I'm assuming they updated the cost to reflect increasing costs. And right now we're probably looking at something more. Miles and I discussed this earlier. That estimate that is 8,170. We're more thinking is in the ballpark of 15,000, 20,000, just given trends of what we've seen in increasing costs.
And then obviously each location will be unique because if the wider the street, the longer the width you have that you're dealing with. If there's any utility considerations as part of that, when you start looking at modifying the ADA ramps that are adjacent, all of those things would be factored into it. We don't have the level of detail of that, but if this is once we make this recommendation and we move forward on implementation, then we would work on the design and start actually putting better numbers together. Do some survey work and actually put that together, which would include refined cost estimates.
And that was like when you were mentioning the cost for drainage, how that could change everything as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's each one's unique to each location because if you've got if you're doing a raised crosswalk in an area where it's a low point, for example, if you have to incorporate a drain inlet and underground utility work, that obviously drives up the costs. But as we, once it doesn't mean. I think the idea for us tonight was to visit this one last time, make sure that this is what we want to move forward with, and then our goal as staff is to take that recommendation to council and start and really get this thing moving forward. One thing we did not add on this, we've talked about it with some of the other community members. We're also considering some additional, we're also considering red curb markings in specific areas to try to alleviate some of the conflicts that we have with some of the vehicles and parking issues as well. So it's not highlighted here as part of that, but as we move forward, that's something we're also bringing forward to the council.
I had one more question on that. Did I read that raised crosswalks more likely wouldn't be put where there's stop signs because they're a traffic calming measure, and the fact that you're at a stop sign, it's like a traffic calming measure? Is that correct?
That's a good question. I've implemented raised crosswalks at stop controlled intersections in the past. It doesn't have to not be included. But yeah, I think it's really just more about each site location and making sure we put the right design and introduce the right measures that we want to implement. I've seen it both ways.
Yeah, and I have a question, and this may be due to the fact that I may have missed a meeting on this topic, but I was just curious of the various traffic calming measures. Did this group align on the raised crosswalk being the most optimal path forward to explore? Or I know in the past we had discussed things like the traffic camera, the speed cameras, or things like that.
Yeah, my recollection is that we put a pause on the raised sidewalks because we didn't know what the cost was going to be. We didn't know what the drainage issues, because we're strictly focusing on visitation right now. And so if we, I think where Randy was thinking was putting it in at Visitation and Mendocino. That's probably the flattest intersection. I wouldn't be opposed to that as a resident of Mendocino, but also I would want to again know more about what the costs are, and could you do bulb outs and then do the raised crosswalk? I mean, are there other additional measures that can be put into place to increase?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we start looking at designing specific locations, those are all on the table. For example, it's part of the toolkit, right? So if we're going to do a raised crosswalk, we will likely incorporate curb and gutter improvements in the surrounding area. So yes, bulb out would probably be a component of it, especially if it's in a wider area where we're trying to implement, because it's not just about the raised crosswalk, because that's one component of traffic calming and pedestrian and bicycle safety. It's also allowing folks to be a little bit further into the view corridor, the view shed, before you actually enter the the vehicle space, which the bulb out would do, and which, so yeah, I think this committee is in the right mindset that as we look into to apply these principles in different areas, we would come up with more refined design scope and cost that would incorporate multiple pieces. Radar feedback signs would be another one that we could incorporate. It doesn't mean, it's not an either or situation. It's really what makes the most sense for that specific area.
So I believe that Randy's idea on Visitacion and Mendocino was going to be a raised intersection as opposed to a raised crosswalk. Is that right, Tomas?
I recall that
That
as
was.
part of I was watching the video from the last meeting when this was originally discussed, and that was one of the concepts that was floated. But it was high level thinking. It wasn't really a refined design at that point.
Also, it's just a lot more significant cost, if I remember correctly. It was talked about internally, so raised crosswalks seemed like a pretty good alternative for that.
In reading the comments on this flyer you attached, it says don't put raised curbs in emergency routes and, thoroughfares. Clearly, Visitacion is those things. How would a raised sidewalk or multiple, affect traffic flow? Could you put the raised sidewalk at Mendocino, Monterey, Mariposa, just kind of ladder it all the way down?
No, that's a good point. I think we definitely want to discuss this with our first responders, with police and fire, obviously, as we move forward with design development. Because yes, for a raised crosswalk, we will not meet ADA if we have the wheel cuts in. It's not like a speed hump down a corridor where first responders utilize, where you can actually put those depressions in certain areas so that they can straddle those without going over the speed hump. There's also something that, there's a speed table that we could utilize in some areas for intersection improvements. It's a little bit more of a gradual raise up and down. It's not as abrupt. We can look at something like that, although you're not getting the same level of height differential as you would for a raised crosswalk. But there's different things that we can look at, and that would be part of our design development to refine it, would be to see what the first responders, police and fire and emergency services would say, so that we don't go down the path of implementing anything that would be an impact to their response time.
So then I go back to one of my original questions was, what is it that the city wants us to do? Because we could say yes to all of these, and then that goes to the city council, and then you guys start working on design implementation like you were talking about. So if all the conversations of, talking to the emergency responders, talking to, really designing doesn't happen until after the city council says anything, what is it that you want us to do?
I think the way I'm looking at this is going to the city council and saying these are the concerns that this subcommittee has been discussing with respect to certain incidents that have occurred, but also folks that live and work and frequent these areas as far as what they see as potential concerns, and basically incorporate this into a capital project. And then from there, the capital project can move forward with designing it based on the scope and the limits. We have multiple items from traffic calming items that we can choose from, and we would work on developing a design with outreach to different stakeholders to get that feedback, emergency responders, and then as we were refining that design, bring that to this committee for review and check-ins. So that would be in my mind, that would be the way we would move forward. So once we understand kind of what we're trying to achieve with the limits and the tools that we have before us, then, and we get the authorization to move forward, we can turn that into a capital project and really start putting pen to paper and really put something together. That was Tomas and I's thinking as far as how we would move forward.
So I'm trying to organize my thought because we discussed a lot of initiative, and I was wondering how, the data was going to be presented. Maybe I envisioned like a table. We discussed loading zones, the parking, the teen reg being converted into a parking, and there was going to be some sort of cost associated with that. Then also the what we've been talking about right now, the raised crosswalk. I forgot the other ones, but it was about 5 of them, and then one of the missing parts were some data and also the cost. So, for instance, the teen area to be converted into a parking in terms of the design, how many spaces we were going to get, how much was that going to cost? Do we have that?
Yeah, we were thinking 12 spots, 12 parking spots. As far as cost, I know I have it somewhere. I can look through my emails on my phone real quick, but we did have an estimate of, very high level estimate of the parking lot. But 12 parking spots, one ADA spot.
I also wanted to mention that the council did have conversations about incorporating that into a housing site. So I don't know if that one would move forward, that parking lot specifically, just because that conversation was happening at the same time we were having these conversations about opening that up for more parking. So we can still bring that up, but that might not, based on the council desires for affordable housing implementation, that might not be part of our ask moving forward. It doesn't mean that the rest of the components can't move forward, but
Yeah, I understand. There's competitive. Competitive issues, and that's one of them. That you have with the business community on the Visitacion, because it's a basic thing to have parking space for businesses, and not to have that and try to stick a affordable housing. That needs to be discussed. The other thing that we talked about, because this might impact what we're doing now, especially the loading zones, is to do a truck route. So I'm not sure if you had a chance to sort of revisit how the truck flow is now, and especially with the loading zones that we're trying to present to the council. How's that going to play out?
No, that's a good point. No, we have not looked closer at the truck route specifically. I know that there was we did have a lot of discussion about that at the last meeting and in different conversations. We do have to take a closer look at that. I was also considering, I think it would be important to do kind of a downtown traffic analysis to take a closer look at traffic volumes and speeds, as well as the truck traffic and how that's kind of working, so that we can try to implement our improvements to that kind of that would make sense with what's kind of happening out there. And then as far as loading zones, I know that there was a lot of conversation about the specific hours for the loading zone, because obviously it could be parking overnight, but during the day when businesses would be getting deliveries, that would be the time to implement it. So that would be something that we would refine with the business community before we move forward on the specific hours.
Also, just to have a number out there for the parking lot, as Maz just mentioned, we don't know the certainty of that moving forward, but in the event that it was a parking lot, we envisioned a slurry seal, so very basic pavement maintenance. So we were estimating somewhere around $25,000 to $30,000 for signing, striping, and a slurry seal of that relatively small area.
Yeah.
And what about the demolition of the concrete and stuff that's there, the existing pad and everything? Was that included?
No, that was not included, because we were trying to keep the estimate as low as possible for the purpose of this recommendation. And a slurry seal, because it's a parking lot, we could just slurry seal it, but you're right, there are some pretty significant asphalt issues. So.
How many spots again? I'm sorry, Thomas.
12.
I guess I just want to bring us back to the points I think that Emily and Christian were making, just around like, what would you like this council to, how would you like us to engage with these, I guess, options? For me, I think I'm having difficulty following all the different, with the status and the maturity of the evaluations of all the different options, right? Because, yeah, I know it's been a couple of months since we've had the conversations where we were brainstorming and going through all of these, and I know it sounds like what's great that we progressed the exploration of some of these things, right? But I can imagine there's probably, a dozen or more different options to help with the overall traffic calming goal that we're trying to achieve. And I can imagine that each of them have different timelines of potential implementations and amount of vetting, et cetera. But it'd just be nice if it was in one place, like a table, like Christian mentioned, where we could say, okay, here's like the crosswalk idea, here's the parking lot idea, here's the parking zone, here's the, you know, the radar, the bull, I can't remember the term you said, but get it there, and then so we can kind of see what the status is, and then we could know maybe how to engage with it, right? Because I would imagine our community wants solutions that can be implemented as soon as possible, right? And some of these are going to be longer term if you have to do this detailed design, right? Mm-hmm. And so just to have that, then it maybe help us figure out if there are some short-term things that we'd rather prioritize, and then long-term things, right? But we can come with just a more holistic recommendation if we just had it all in one place.
I will say it's not really a table, but I have the previous agenda report that went to council, and as far as seeing everything at once and kind of getting a high-level summary of each of the recommendations, that's what we recommended last time. But yeah, but I hear you. I think a table would be useful, in organizing it another way that might be helpful for you guys. But
yeah, and it could be a living document, right? As we have like these little pieces of information, whether it's the cost estimate, whether there's the other plans and alternate, considerations for certain that might rule out other options, but we can update it, and that way we can all just stay organized.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think we have. That is a good point. It's, it's good to do things systematically. It brings efficiency and focus on what we're working on. We also think that we discussed at one point inviting the community in that area in the library and having a good set of data, and in a way that they could see it and see what our process, how we got where we got, and the sequence of things that we discussed. Like right now, it seems like we need to get the first responder involved, that's just another piece of data. We got to tight up more of the cost stuff. There's some competing ideas in terms of what to do with the teen center, affordable housing, parking space. So all that, and I also forgot about the parking meters, right? So is that still going on?
The robo meters,
sticks,
the safety sticks, nice.
yeah, that was part of our original recommendation, and just based on our conversations, I haven't heard from you guys that we have changed our mind on that. So that's assuming you guys still on board, that we would recommend that still.
Yeah. So for me, I struggle because we made these recommendations in
July.
And like increasing the fines for double parking could have been done immediately. Like it didn't need to, still doesn't, it should have been done, right? The loading zone in front of the market could have been done immediately, right? Or within a month, because it was just striping, the guy was on board, so I'm not sure, like, if, there are various things that can be implemented. In my mind, maybe the teen center parking lot doesn't happen because of the conflicting, potential issues or potential uses. The parking sticks could have been implemented. They don't cost anything. There could have at least been a pilot on that since July. Like, we're in January now. And so for me, my position still hasn't changed. Like, do it yesterday. Like, let's get things done. Like, I don't know how much it's going to cost. We still don't know how much it's going to cost. The city council is going to go, how much does it cost? Because I think that was what the problem was last time. Like, go back and figure out and tell us how much it's going to cost. So when you go back to the council and say, well, the committee still recommends all of these 6 things, and they added the raised sidewalks and doing bulb outs and painting, red, I think you're still going to get the same question from them, like, how much is it going to cost? Well, how long is it going to take to implement it? And so I would feel better if you had those answers before you go to city council, because then, like, things can actually get done at, like, shortly thereafter that meeting, because otherwise, June will be here and we're still talking about getting something done. And it'll be more than a year after the accident and the tragedy that's caused us to start having these conversations.
I will say I do think we have a general estimate. I mean, you know, we have our estimates and things change and once construction begins. But as far as numbers for council, for instance, for the raised crosswalks, I envision a scenario when they ask, well, how many crosswalks? And we say, well, that's to be determined, but each one is from 15 to 20,000, something like that. That costs. I mean, it's not a perfect estimate, but it's something to kind of get that number in their head. The MPS Safety 6, those are free, as she explained to us, the sales representative. The vacant teen center lot, again, 25, 30,000. And the parking spots and loading zones, striping, these are all just striping adjustments. Don't have a number off the top of my head because we have a couple loading zones and a couple parking spots. But again, that's something we could have before it actually goes to council. And we would show you guys the report before we actually go to council, as we've done in the past.
Okay.
I think what I'm hearing from Emily, though, is just that in general, like, maybe if we had just a better sense of the timing, the timeline for these things, right? Almost like I work in like program management, so it's all about project planning, right? And so it's ideally if we had better clarity as a council for when we make a recommendation, what's the timeline for evaluation? When's the next opportunity to bring it up for a decision, right? What's the outcome of that discussion decision, right? So we can just more effectively engage, right, and align our activities. We can also, I think one of our charters is to solicit feedback from the community, right? So we could be able to, Christian points out, create forums to say, hey, here's all the options with the complete set of information instead of partial, right? Because I think it's really hard for us as a board, as also for the community to interact with partial information. That's almost worse than no information at times, right? So I think we're just trying to figure out what's the timeline to get to that, so we can get the right input, and then we can get to the decision, and we can move forward from there. Otherwise, it just feels like, because I echo Emily's sentiment, it just feels like a little bit of Groundhog's Day, where we're just talking about the same thing, and it's not clear if anything has progressed.
Right, and just I mean, I hear you guys. You know, that kind of happens sometimes as far as timelines being uncertain. But we did do quite a bit of outreach and surveying, which was not in the public works realm. It was on the communications team, but that did take some time. And then we would come to our meetings and discuss the feedback, discuss what we heard from businesses and residents. So that did extend the timeline, having actual, you know, feet on the ground for people to go get that feedback. But noted, I agree that we could be clear about the timeline.
If I may, through the chair, just an observation that I've made on this particular item is that I think there's also, you know, what is the scope that we're trying to achieve, right? I mean, are we doing enforcement? Are we looking at increasing parking spaces and loading spaces? Are we looking at safety component? Those are all very different things. And I think part of the challenge is that we are trying to do all of those in one thing, and that makes it really complicated. So maybe that's one of the feedback that I'm hearing. Maybe that's where we go, is we actually start separating these out, not to, you know, because each one's going to have a different approach. Doing a traffic calming project where you're doing signs and you're doing public bidding and all that, obviously that's a different timeline and a different cost. Going with the safety, the sticks for the enforcement, that's a completely different time and incorporates more PD support. Doing the loading zones, it's a little bit different, where you're doing more outreach to the business district and businesses and getting that feedback. But the implementation relatively quick, because we can either get a striping contractor or have our city staff do it. So maybe that's one thing that would help us move forward on some of these, is to actually have them separated out in different paths. But it doesn't mean that we can't, in a nice way, kind of package this conversation and still take that to council. But maybe that I hear you guys as far as what we're trying to do. I think that's, for me, that's when I look at this, it's confusing what we're trying to achieve with all the different pieces. And maybe that's one way that we can try to separate it out and start tackling each one as an individual item.
I mean, to that point, I think if you start scoping out each initiative and put some sort of, you know, end result, it might be an interesting exercise. I'm not opposed to that, but you're not going to find a silver bullet. And what we're trying to do is organize that area. And some of those stuff that we're talking about are pretty standard in other places, right? Like, for instance, somebody was double parked, and then somebody try to go around that person that was double parked and that tragedy happened. So if you analyze that problem, why was that person double parked? Was no enough parking there? Why was that person was able to speed that much in that short period of time? So it's a little bit of everything, right? So I think, and if you're going to go through this, let's lift every rock and find out what can we do in general, and not just go like, oh, this will solve this problem, or this will solve. Because I think we're not going to find a silver bullet here.
No, absolutely. There is no one item that would solve all of the problems. It's a collection of different things. I'm just talking more from not from the understanding the concerns side. It's really more about the implementation side is where I'm kind of coming from is how do you achieve the goals that we're trying to get to? So we've had a lot of conversation about what the concerns are as a whole, but as we start moving forward towards implementation, let's move on the enforcement and the fines. Let's just, that's a different track than a capital project to do, raised crosswalks, for example. Maybe that's where I'm kind of going. It's not about that they're not related. Obviously, the truck routes is another one that will take us a little bit more time because we're going to need likely to get a traffic consultant on board to help us take a closer look, do some surveys, field surveys with that. And there's also third-party data we can obtain. But as far as the implementation side is kind of where I was going with starting on some of the pieces like you guys are talking about while we're refining and dealing with the other parts.
Yeah.
No, I mean, that's an excellent point. And I mean, from what I do, I always pay attention to the sequence because sometimes if you do something before something, then you're almost redoing the other stuff. So I don't know, maybe we also try to either rank them, what's priority, what's low-hanging fruit, and I think that's probably what Emily was trying to allude. Some of the stuff is just hanging fruit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then what's the sequence? And that's a good point. How to rank them.
Also, I just want to add real quick too. We deliberately shelved some of the visitation, I guess you could say, quick builds because we were transitioning. Randy was departing and Moz was joining us. We didn't want to get too ahead of ourselves, so we kind of shifted gears in August, September, October to the Halloween issue, a couple other things. But that was on purpose. I think I expressed with you guys that we wanted to make sure we had our new director on board before we just started striping up what would essentially be his road, in his city. So.
Yeah, no, and I get that, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate what you're saying, Maz, is you're right. We're trying to do many things at once, right, and solving, stemming from one tragedy, but it's brought visibility to different things. So I think
Absolutely.
if when you and Tomas go back and I would say refine the proposal that Karen put together, I would prefer that you break it out by enforcement, traffic calming, and so that way the city council can say, yep, let's go on that one, or yep, let's go on that one. That one's going to take, and give them an estimate of like, okay, well, to do, the traffic calming of the bulb outs and the red striping and the raised crosswalks, whatever it is that gets recommended, that, okay, that's going to take money, one. So you're going to have to figure out the budget, but two, it's going to take a month to get a bid and then, a month to get consultants or however long. And then construction will be another 3 months, right? So there's an actual idea. And also, I'm in favor of the raised crosswalks, but would you do, which ones, right? When you go back to them, have more of a proposal on crossing Visitation versus next to, parallel to Visitation, all the way up to Klamath, all the way down. And then I would, to that point, the truck traffic, I think, that can't be done can we chew gum and walk at the same time? Sure. Trust that the Public Works Department can do all these many different things at one time. But you're not going to have that truck traffic survey before I think you're going to start doing like striping for, loading zones.
Right. Yeah. Right. Exactly. Yeah.
And maybe another way I was thinking about, to your point about how to organize all the different things we're trying to solve for, right? As I've been listening and participating in these meetings, I know there's like 4 buckets of things you're trying to solve for. One, we're trying to solve for speeding, right? The second one we're trying to solve for is maybe managing two-way lane traffic, right? That's why we're trying to avoid double parking, right?
Absolutely.
We're trying to improve intersection safety, right? That's everything from like painting the crosswalks to the flags, like increasing visibility, right? That's
Bulb outs, yeah.
no,
yeah.
bulb outs, right?
All those, yeah.
So you can start to almost like bucket, and then the fourth one is bike safety, right? We talked about the bike lanes, right? So we can almost list out like what is it, the problems we're trying to solve, right? Because then we can almost ladder each of the things we talked about. Ladders, those are all like solution ideas against those problems. But I think we'd be looking for your expertise for each of those problems and our ideas. How effective are each of those at addressing them? How much rough cost is it for each of those? And maybe what's the rough timeline, right? So like I'm just picturing that matrix in that way so that it just helps us kind of see it all in one place. And then we can have the trade-off conversations in a more intentional way. It's like, oh, okay, we have like 4 ideas that are all stacked up to help with the two-way lane traffic. We don't have anything for speeding. Is that the right balance, or do we want to, reallocate some of our efforts to make sure we're addressing all of that? And we can also go back to the community and say, hey, between speeding, two-way lane traffic, whatever, intersection safety, which ones are your highest priorities, right?
So that was what Karen had covered, and we had discussed pretty much everything that we see here today regarding the concerns from the community, especially the local neighborhood. A lot of the overlapping that we did for the one-way street proposal that we're going to talk about tonight kind of spilled over into visitation, is how the visitation thing started as well, right? To start taking a closer look at the issues with visitation because of getting the neighborhood involved and talking about issues before they even had the survey.
Yeah,
No,
I mean, we did use the, we could learn from that template that we use, on the exercise to try to make Mariposa and Monterey a one-way street, and how, we got the community engaged. They did really engage, and they didn't like it. It didn't go through, So, but at this point, I guess the discussion is there's a lot of initiative, and there's a lot of missing data. Let's consolidate it and, review one more time, and then get the community engaged and stuff like that.
And I think what you're talking about as far as community engagement isn't the survey that Tomas and communications team did, and then Tomas went and did the business. I think those are great, resources which help us kind of focus in on what are the problems and the issues to solve. What I'm hearing is that the next community engagement would be like, here's our potential solutions to these problems. As a community, would you prefer to see raised sidewalks, or would you just prefer to see bulb outs and red striping? Right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and if you had even if you had the cost or the timeline information, that might also factor, like, hey, knowing that this solution might take longer, are you okay with that, or no? It's so bad, we just rather have it now, and even if it is X more expensive, then it's their taxpayer dollars, right? And they should have a voice in terms of maybe that it's worth funding, even though it's ultimately the council's decision, right?
What was it? Wasn't there potential grant funding that was kind of mentioned to accomplish some of these projects?
There are different funding types through CCAG or the San Mateo County Transit Authority that would be towards safety improvements. So yeah, those are definitely things we can start looking into. We would need to be a little bit more refined as far as our design and scope. So that's something we can work on, and absolutely some of the more expensive, like the more construction related stuff, loading zones, stuff like that, different. But if we're talking about the bulb outs and kind of some of the traffic calming elements like that, absolutely. We can get a scope together, and once we get that community input, that always helps grant opportunities. When you have that community feedback, we can start shopping that as well. It'll be a little bit longer, obviously, to take. So a lot of these are competitive grant opportunities, and but there's calls that come through, and we can certainly do that.
to that end, would the process then be maybe next month's meeting is a call to the community to get together again at the library if possible and have feedback on potential solutions before you go to city council?
We can certainly do that and have it more of a public-facing meeting. So you're thinking about having this meeting, next month's meeting, kind of more of an open forum?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea. We can certainly do that. And with that, we can come back with this more kind of the different buckets, if you will, of implementation, the enforcement side, the safety side, the commercial loading zone side, and kind of have them part of the same conversation, but different elements.
Right.
And like when you had your neighborhood meeting at the library, because it brought a lot of, we believe that it would have brought more people to the meeting if it was at the library. So instead of having our scheduled meeting here, it was at the library to have a community, a neighborhood especially invited opportunity to come.
Yeah, that makes sense. We did that. We've had, I know that we've had some different meetings at the community space over there at the library. We'll double check the availability, and I think that's a great idea. It's in the middle of the area that we're talking about, right on top of that, so makes sense.
Yeah,
invite
and we need,
business owners too.
and we also did a flyer, and I think we did on the board. So we just need to give it a little bit of propaganda so they expose. Yeah.
One other element that always helps, and we have to look at our budget, but if we can do some light refreshments, obviously that always helps bring people in as well.
Yeah, and I would say if we're going to do this, we need to let Carolyn know right away so she can put in the star and in the blast and all that.
Yeah.
Get it out.
Yeah, great ideas.
Mm.
Refreshments. Nice.
So are we agreed to hold the next one in the library if the library's available, but at least hold it as an open forum to the community?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea too.
Even if we have to refine, we'll work with you with the commission, the committee. Even if we have to change the date based on the availability of space, we will work with you all on that. And I would say that maybe what we can do is we can share in advance of that meeting with the chair, kind of the refinement and kind of the organizing of the conversations we've had, if that works for this committee. That way we're not losing any time, and we can have that kind of informally with the chair, and then we can move forward with that conversation in the larger group.
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Everybody else is nodding, so yeah. Okay. So for visitation survey improvements, are we okay to just kind of put a pin in it for tonight, and that's where we're going? Or do you want any?
No, I think that's fine for what we are. We wanted to see if there are no other general thoughts or concepts or ideas we should consider. I think we have the feedback we need to basically refine this the messaging that we have for this item, and we'll share that with the chair, and we'll move forward with the next one.
Can I just confirm, is one of the concepts like the same traffic enforcement, speed enforcement cameras have been piloted around various cities here, like San Francisco, et cetera?
Are you asking if they have been piloted?
Or no, I'm asking if could that be one of the concepts that we could apply here?
I think we can bring that up as part of it, because part of the conversation were those the traffic sticks. So
The safety sticks it's different.
I know it's different, but
sorry.
what I'm saying is but under that enforcement umbrella, that could be one of the items. It doesn't have to just be the safety sticks.
Yeah.
So
totally.
absolutely,
Okay, great.
we can put that as part of the conversation.
Because I think that could be a potentially a cost-effective speed mitigator, right? If people know that, they're going to get an expensive ticket if they're going above 25 in the city, right?
Got to make it expensive for them to learn their lesson.
So for the parking sticks, once again, it's been a while. I know that we talked about the time that they were going to go into effect. And also, that's a mixed-use area. You have businesses and you also have residents there. Is that clear, or?
Is the enforcement hours clear? Or
Yeah.
I think we had We just thrown out, dinner time 6 to 8 or 12 to 2. I don't think but I'm reading the agenda report right now. We didn't give them exact hours. We just presented that option to the council, and those are the hours that came back to us. But that's what I'm thinking is how if those were to be installed.
I mean, I think we need to have something. So when do present this, we just don't want to have too many holes.
Yeah,
and we
agreed.
got some sort of reasoning.
Yeah, and in the past we've compiled, research and spreadsheets before for, I think it was only you were on the committee, Christian, but for the city research when we exploring the residential parking permit. So I'm envisioning a spreadsheet where, like we've mentioned, we split it up into categories based on the type of measure we want to implement. We have costs and we have timelines, and regarding the safety sticks, maybe in loading zones we have just proposed hours, something that they can latch onto and actually see when that would be. So.
That could be part of the feedback we receive, obviously, right? Yeah, we'll put something out there, and then let's see what the community says
Right,
as
and
far
then,
as
yeah,
is concerned, as far as what we put out there.
Do you think, is it possible to have an attribute around effectiveness, right? Because I think folks, like even myself, like knowing, I don't know if I know that necessarily the statistics or, their history around how effective some of these measures are, but having folks that might have that more of that experience, even if it's a rough rubric of like 1 star versus 5 stars in terms of effectiveness of a raised crosswalk at mitigating speed, like, if having some expert input onto that might also just help.
Right, yeah, that's a good idea. Just this is a gimme right here that was already included in but for instance, something like raised crosswalks can reduce pedestrian crashes by 45%. So to have that for other items as well.
Yeah,
We'll
so
definitely,
wherever there
we can
is,
definitely consider that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
That's a good point because I've been in this committee, I don't know, 7 years, and I don't have a clear understanding of those raised intersections or how effective they are, who has done them in the Bay Area.
Yeah, and especially with members of the public who, are not traffic engineers, I'm sure they would appreciate as much data as possible. So.
Yeah, because this team, you guys provide so much great input, even in terms of, we're like, why don't we just reduce the speed limit? There's like so much consideration. Why don't we have, traffic enforcement, right? So just, being able to help guide the public, I think it would be very helpful.
Yeah. Chris?
Thank you. First, I have a question. It's kind of a crazy quilt of comments. Was AI used to summarize the Engaged survey is something I'm wondering. I also have a question about how this is presented to City Council. The last time it was presented afterwards, I was talking with one of the City Council members, and they interpreted the fact that it had been reviewed by you as an approval by you. And I had to correct that impression. So I think we need to be really careful. And just to what you were saying earlier about what it means when it comes through this committee and then goes to the City Council. Is it just because you've looked at it? You have questions about it that you've fed into the process, but you're not necessarily saying go for it. So the teen center, those spots, because they aren't near a residence or they're kind of off to the side, they are at risk for some abuse, and we might want to think about how we'd want to address that, because it's not in front of somebody's house where they'd notice that 72 hours had passed and the vehicle is still there. You could potentially have cars that just sit there for weeks or months, like the ones that are there right now. One thing that I think has gotten lost that I think is a great help when it comes to providing parking is a 2-hour parking limit, which has already been brought up several times at the City Council by members of the public. And, you know, we have that one vehicle in front of Mamma Mia. I'll share a photograph with the committee. It's basically being used right now as a garage for repair of that VW. Is it possible for the city to put a limit on the truck size that travels down, for example, Visitacion? Sometimes you'll see that vehicles over 2 axles not allowed, you know, and obviously we'd want to do this early enough so that a vehicle could make some decisions about what they need to do, but it might help us control what's going on in our business district. Loading zone times, we have talked about those every time this comes up, but we're not documenting what we think are ideal. And in the absence of that documentation, we keep discussing it, and it's one of the examples of what you were talking about earlier. So I think we just need to make a suggestion, put that down on paper, put it in somebody's notes, and then move forward. Another thing, thank you, committee member Leo. I'm probably mispronouncing that. You mentioned bike parking. Thank you for mentioning bike parking.
Bike safety, but
Bike safety, but
oh, okay.
bike parking is a part of that too.
Yeah.
And there's a very interesting bike rack in front of Midtown Market. I don't know if you've ever noticed this. It's it sits like this between two trash cans, and I have looked at it often trying to figure out how would I actually park my bike here where I would not be obstructing people walking down the sidewalk. So it's just another part of the safety on the street, is just to look at, and it doesn't need to be a part of this project, but maybe we just have our eyes open as we're on visitation and noticing these little things that we could tweak. You know, that's a case of maybe moving it or moving the trash cans or something so that it's actually a parking spot that's useful. Thank you.
If I could talk a little bit about that, because you sort of want to, understand the different trends, and with bikes you also have scooters and other things, and we want to promote, right, biking and that type of transportation. So yeah, definitely. I think, does the library has bike parking?
They have bike racks in front.
But yeah, so that would be, and maybe have it in several different places.
Yes, and if we really want to go all the way, we could talk about bike share someplace with a setup so that we could get around town a little bit more effectively. Yeah, that's one of the things that I hope we can put on the work plan for 2026. I know I'm jumping ahead, but is to really look at how we can better support biking.
And this speaks to the discussion we had in terms of the Bayland. They seem to be at another century, and so how can us start reconcile, harmonize that type of accommodations when it comes to, what do they call it, e-hobs and
You want
et
to have
cetera?
coffee sometime and talk about this? We can.
Sure. Okay.
All right, Tomas, when you put together the spreadsheet for the description and cost and time frame and effectiveness and whatnot, will you go back to the business comments that you got from them on their loading times and just take that and plop it right in?
Yeah,
as
for
the
sure.
suggested
Yeah,
loading
that'll
times?
of course drive the hours of overthinking.
Right,
So.
that just makes sense. Yeah. Anyone else before we move on to new business? Nope. All right. New business, 2026 work plan discussion. This is just to get our ideas, I believe.
So I'd like to introduce this item. Yes, so essentially what we would like to do is we're working on getting our liaison from the council scheduled with the chair and vice chair. This is an opportunity for the committee to have a conversation about the 2026 work plan and essentially come to some sort of a general consensus on what areas we want to focus on for this year moving forward, so that the chair and vice chair can share that information clearly with our council member. So that's really the core function of this item tonight, is to have that internal dialogue amongst the committee members, so you folks can come to a general consensus on the areas we really want to focus on. The staff will be available for questions, obviously, but really we want to give this opportunity to you and anybody in the public that wants to be part of this conversation to figure out what we really want to work on moving forward. And then obviously, as we are working to schedule that meeting with the council liaison, then that conversation can take place and move forward. And then we'll come, I think the process has been in the past, correct me if I'm wrong, but after that liaison committee, then that work plan gets kind of refined and gets adopted by this committee. Is that correct?
Yeah, it gets adopted by the committee and then also adopted by city council.
Yeah. So that's what tonight's focus is to start that conversation about the work plan outside of what we've already talked about as far as the old business.
And just kind of some context on how they've developed in the past. I mean, I have the 2024 one, so just kind of you guys can kind of see how these things evolve. But a lot of things we have been crossing off our list, and then when we went into 2025, we had some sort of, I guess you could say, last-minute additions. For instance, the Visitation Avenue item, the review of the feedback on the pilot program. So my point is that I think we've crossed a couple items on the last work plan, so it's a clean slate, if you will. And again, of course, the liaisons have their priorities and what they would want to see on the work plan, but just giving this opportunity to kind of give you guys, like what you've been waiting to address.
Christian?
Yeah, so it seems like I'm probably the only member that that's been around, around enough to understand this process, and it could get a little, weird here and there. But overall, I mean, some of the things that they, depending who's going to be the liaison or who's going to be driving it among the city councils, sometimes they want to have one topic and finish it. In my opinion, sometimes that's possible, but if you're waiting for data on that one topic, you just don't want to be working on that topic, and you can move on to different topics. So when the chair and the vice chair go and talk to them, just mention and talk a little bit about the process.
And just so you guys know, it's a Mayor Mackin and Council Member Kern are the liaisons. Just heads up.
So that's one question I would encourage for you guys to ask to have more clarity on the process that is expected. And other than that, it's just a matter of working on a list of things that we think might need work, and then they will obviously comment on it and add or subtract or why not.
Is there anything specific, Christian, that you would like to see that is brought to the work plan for next year? Just like, things you've talked to other, neighbors or residents or businesses that you're thinking generally that, maybe 2026 is the year that we tackle that.
In addition to this list?
The 2025 is pretty much done. There's nothing left on there except for, finishing Visitation and the San Bruno. But I would say don't focus on those, just anything new.
Oh, so the number 5, if that's being withdraw or
That's done.
that's done?
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things that we talked in the past, and I don't think it was adopted or it never made it, was the sidewalks, and so you have inconsistent sidewalks on Crocker Park, and you also have inconsistent sidewalks on Bayshore, especially with the Trailer Park community. So that would be one point that definitely talk about it, and just make it more bike friendly. I know when Karen was here, she put a lot of, she put some effort on that, and that's why you see those bicycle stickers on the roads and etc. So just keep working on that.
Thanks. Raymond, anything specific that you'd like to see?
I guess the thing that is top of mind for me was just maybe parking, like how to increase parking within Brisbane. So I don't know if that's already part of number 2, since we're kind of looking at that for Visitation, but just community-wide, I perceive that there's a lot of cars that are just parked, indefinitely. And one, it's just a potential safety issue, right? Just in terms of having narrower streets and poorer lines of visibility for people, you know, kids playing and things like that. So is there a way that we can improve, you know, the overall keeping cars from being just stagnant in place around Brisbane?
Paul?
Where do I start?
Exactly.
So, yeah, I'm talking about the inconsistent sidewalks on in the Crocker Industrial Park. Not having a sidewalk on North Hill, as I mentioned, coming down from Guadalupe is a big deal. I see a lot of people walk down there and they're walking in the street. And if it's raining, they're walking further out in the street because the gutter's got a lot of water. But a lot of people walk down there, and it's amazing. Even though you're expecting to see somebody there walking on North Hill as you're going towards Guadalupe, if they're in the shadow of those trees and they're wearing dark clothing, it's really, even during the daylight, sometimes it's like, whoa, there's somebody in the street. So I see that was a missed opportunity back when they did the industrial park and they didn't put a sidewalk down there. I'm surprised they didn't. I'm not expecting that to be done in our work plan, but I wanted to bring it up because I know within the time frame for our work plan, they're going to be continuing that discussion to build at Guadalupe and North Hill, that property. It's my understanding they want to build housing there. And so that would be the time that maybe that could be where they work on that sidewalk issue. Another thing I'm concerned with is for vehicular and pedestrian and utility safety, these large, improperly maintained trees, if they're on Bay Shore, I believe that's Caltrans, those are their trees. I'm not sure, but I believe they are. Still,
I was under the impression they're our responsibility. But
Okay.
I'll double check.
so I just want to reiterate, and I've brought this up at council meetings, and I've even brought up case studies of multi-million dollars, like $40 million lawsuit to the county for a young boy that was critically injured. He lost a leg and half his pelvis when a tree fell on his tent in one of our county parks. And the county ended up paying $40 million over a tree, knowing, like, you go camping at a place, the tree's going to fall. But you are responsible. The city's responsible if those are our trees. If the trees are dead, diseased, or improperly maintained. And I know that it's been said that it's very expensive to remove these trees, and I get that. But I also believe that there are hazard mitigation grants, in particular because of the eucalyptus, that they're they're a threat to our infrastructure. I mean, how many times have our lights went out in Brisbane because of interference with trees recently? That's what the PG&E reports say, that it was branches falling on the power lines. So protect our infrastructure, protect our roadways. If the trees on San Bruno Avenue are on the SFPUC's easement through there and on private property, those are a threat to us. So whoever owns those trees should be notified that they could be liable or will be liable, because any arborist will look at those trees and say, like a lot of the Monterey pines, those are past their life expectancy. That tree's going to fall down, yes. So improperly maintained trees, if we can work on a funding mechanism that can really come in and we can have an impact, but make our right-of-ways for vehicles and people, you know, safer. Let's see, where else? No. I agree with the issue with the sidewalk on Bay Shore. You know, that that neighborhood at the trailer park, they really have to walk the gauntlet. And many times you see families with strollers trying to walk with their toddlers right there on the white line that's right next to the bike lane, but is also a lane that people drift into all the time. So I agree with that, Christian. That's a big deal. And lastly, I'd like to see us reassess our crosswalks with better signage. Like at the skate park to the community park, there's no high visibility signage. It says crosswalk. And that's like a heavily used crosswalk. So.
Okay, yeah, these are all Paul, and since you are a vice chair, you will be there, of course. So yeah, this is for you guys to. So yeah, you can of course express these if that's what you guys want to, as a committee, ask of the liaisons or present to the liaisons.
Okay. So one last thing, and I know it's getting late, but I've put in service requests, and when I bring up things like that I see out in the street, I don't know how I can really, I want to explain, like, for instance, out in front here on Valley, and I always get this wrong, this is Park Lane, not Park Place, Park Lane, right? So out here at Park Lane and Valley, if you make the right turn to go to Bayshore, you're in the right lane when you make the right turn. But if you're coming down Valley and you're passing this intersection, the dotted white line is lost. It's no longer there. And so I've seen people coming down there, and then all of a sudden they're going kind of like straight into the right turn lane because the white line disappears in that turn. And I thought that maybe there should be some signage that indicates that there is a right turn, like right turn lane, or something that showed that there's a lane shift there. That's all. I mean, most people know it, and so they drive it like they know it, but more times than not, I've seen vehicles. And then the last thing is I'd like to go around. I don't know if it's best if I take pictures and then submit them, but I'm really concerned with line of sight and vegetation, like if you're approaching Bayshore from Valley, the bushes on the north side of Valley on Bayshore, the eucalyptus branches and stuff make it to where you have to pull up further up to see if somebody's coming in. And I've seen cars and bicycles run that stoplight or trying to beat out the yellow light, but end up running the stoplight, and then traffic starts to go, and then here comes somebody. So your line of sight is blocked by the vegetation. And, I don't know how we proceed with that things like that.
Okay. Yeah. We can.
I think, for the work plan, I would focus some of the stuff that we should be managing, like, and dealing with as far as like service requests. I think we can have a separate conversation on some of those things, and see how we can address those. I wouldn't want to lose the time that you have with the liaisons to focus on some larger scale issues. But I'm making notes of it. Some of the, refreshing some of our striping, dealing with some of our signage, things of that nature. If we want to do something more robust, we can bring that up. But maybe I don't want you guys to lose too much time trying to bring up those things with the liaison. But I've taken notes on it on the service requests. If you send pictures in, I think that's always really helpful. But we can have an offline conversation, because I know that you and maybe others have had a lot of time out there, and you know exactly where some of the major problem spots are. I've taken notes, and I'll follow up on some of the things that I've heard right now. But yeah, I just wanted to reiterate that. I don't want you guys to lose too much time with the liaison when you have a conversation about some of the higher level concerns that are outside of what I would consider more day-to-day operational things that we should be working on.
Thanks.
Quick question. Do we have a deadline? Because I know I'm going to think about additionals. I'm saying maybe we are down the road, we might have other concerns or issues that we would like to bring that are not in mind right now.
I think if it's something safety related, something that comes up, I mean, there's always things that are going to come up that may be high priority, even if it's not on the work plan. I think we should still talk about those things, even if it's not part of an official work plan. I think this is really more about, a wish list of things that you think that would be helpful, big picture. We should really talk about that and really try to refine that before we have that liaison meeting. I don't know if we have anything. We don't have anything scheduled yet.
No, not yet.
But I think based on timing, Tomas, can you share when do we try to have this adopted? We don't want to wait too long, obviously.
Right. In the past, we were late, like April, May, so we want to have this adopted by March. So the liaison meeting would take place. I've already reached out to the city manager's office to schedule that meeting, and she'll be in contact. Angel Labar will be in contact with Paul and Emily. And so assuming the meeting happens in late January or early February, we would want to adopt this work plan by March or in March.
Yeah, we don't want to lose too much time. So with that, I would say is like let's try to have that conversation tonight as far as what you think we really should tackle. Again, it doesn't mean that if something important comes up moving forward, it doesn't mean that we're not going to hear it. We can still have that conversation, and whether if it's really high priority and it's a safety component, we can look at we can bring that up regardless of whether it's on the work plan or not. If it's something, we can always go back to the council if something really, really important and significant comes up. But yeah, I think just to keep things moving, and we don't want to lose our traction. And on top of that, some of these things are going to take time to get implemented and construct and built, depending on which ones we're talking about. I don't want to lose too much time with adoption of the work plan.
So I guess if I could suggest another topic to this, to bring to the council. Several years ago, we spent a lot of time at inventory all the alleyways, and there were several grants, and a lot of those alleyways have been, built out with stairs and so forth. And what I was thinking is if we could do so in the Brisbane map, if we could have some sort of icon that identify where they are, and have some sort of plaque, or because you could use them to walk around town, and they're very, very, very useful and very Pinterest, and it just adds to the culture.
That's a great suggestion.
And a lot of time was spent on those and money.
Okay. No, that's a great suggestion. Things like that, I think that would be a great suggestion for the committee
to build on that. Yeah, I think those little alleyways, they're very narrow. Sometimes they have a railing, sometimes they have stairs, sometimes they don't. But just to improve the walkability of the town, would we ever consider like having them maybe lit at certain parts of the night? Because they're really dark, and I don't think after the sun sets, they're probably a little bit scary. But I don't know, would we consider things like that just to increase walkability in the evening time? I also had another suggestion for consideration of the work plan, and this involves Tunnel Avenue and Lagoon Road. Both of those areas have undulations that, in dry conditions are a fun kind of roller coaster way to get into town, but like during the rain, they tend to accumulate water and have, significant puddling. I notice the puddling a great deal on Tunnel Avenue, especially like near whatever that gas refiner, the filling station is. But there's significant puddling where cars have to merge to the middle to get through to avoid going through really deep water. And as a bike thoroughfare, that's also very, even in dry conditions, it's very dangerous because there isn't a bike lane there. But a lot of, I do see a decent number of bikes using that as a commuter throughway. So yeah, my recommendation would be any plans to improve the conditions on either of those roads.
Yeah, and so I'll do the meeting minutes, of course, and I can kind of summarize what we've talked about here right now for when in preparation of the council liaison meeting. Also, just about the work plan in general, I do want to add that in the past they've been, maybe this will change, but in the past they've been very liaison driven, I guess you could say. For instance, a lot of the things we would prioritize were obviously what they consider priorities. So maybe they'll have something that we haven't thought of. So that's just something to keep in mind.
Chris?
Someone brought up the power failures, and I think it would be interesting if we had some power failure statistics. Maz doesn't live in town, so he doesn't necessarily have to sit there in the dark. So it would be interesting to provide information so that you understand to the degree to which we've been being impacted. On the trees, we might be able to work with OSEC because they have some tree planting conversations, as I understand it. They've identified trees that are suitable for planting. It would be good to not only take the trees out, but replace them. Street lights. There are so many streets in this town that are so dark to walk on. I always have to go with a flashlight and all kinds of lights on me because I wear dark clothes, and you know what that means. And I've often wondered if we could, I know we can't afford to replace the lights on Visitation, but could we modify them? Because all the light from these lights goes into the living rooms and the kitchens of the people who live on the second floor of those buildings, and very little of it actually goes down onto the street. Is there something we can do to modify them? And they have a weird motion sensitivity that I don't understand. I don't think a streetlight should be motion sensitive, but they act as if they are. Kinder Morgan, I've noticed that flooding as well, and it really concerns me, the gas station. It really concerns me that they don't have sufficient drainage at a site that stores fuel. But the thing I really want to talk about is Bayshore. Is Bayshore a part of the town of Brisbane, or is it simply a thoroughfare that people use to get past Brisbane? What do we want for Bayshore? Because I think it's not our responsibility to give people an alternative to 101. There's no other community up and down the peninsula that has to have an option. So why are we stuck with that? And if we could really re-envision Bayshore, slow it down, seriously slow it down, and make it a part of the community, that could have a considerable impact on the town of Brisbane, because people would be driving there because they were coming here, perhaps. And there'd be more likelihood to have businesses, retail, things like that along Bayshore if it was an attractive place, a street, not a road. I don't know how you would put that into a work plan, but I'd really, really like to see us re-envision Bayshore in the city of Brisbane. Thank you.
May I?
Yeah, go ahead.
To answer a couple questions regarding the tank farms and drainage and the roadways, Lagoon Road and Tunnel Road are owned by the Baylands, Universal Paragon or Tuntex or whatever, Sunquest or many names. But they own the property, and we have an easement to be able to drive through there. So the maintenance falls on them to probably just maintain potholes, but anything that's has to do with the subsidence out there, creating these pools of water, is probably not going to happen until the Baylands is developed. But with that said about the tank farms, the tank farms does have good drainage. The tanks themselves are on solid rock. They're on the toe of Icehouse Hill. That's why they're safe, and all their drainage system for those tanks is safe. But as you see the buildings, the roadways, and all the pools around there, that's because of all the landfill that's around the rest of the property. So, I've never seen anything happen to any of that in the last 30 years. So that's my take on the water issue.
Thanks. That's helpful.
Yeah, I agree. As frustrating as it is, I don't think anything's going to happen with that until they start changing tunnel and start changing lagoon.
Yeah.
Yes, Chris.
Actually, I've seen an agreement that states that they're supposed to keep that road maintained to the satisfaction of the town of Brisbane.
Please share that agreement. Let's have Tomas and Maz get on that because you could flood your car in the middle of that when it's really bad. Like it's
yeah.
deep
Yeah.
water. Like I would not bicycle through that at all. And I don't even take that road anymore because, you know, it gets up to your car, your engine.
Yeah, for years we keep allowing them to postpone waiting until development begins, but I think there's evidence that we should not have to wait for development to begin. They don't have a source of water right now. They can't begin until they have one. So I think it's reasonable to ask them to do something at least in the interim, including a bike path.
God forbid we ask for a sidewalk, but a bike path, maybe. So just highlights for me, so we can get out of here. I would like to see, and we'll vigorously advocate that we have a sidewalk route survey that will cover installing more sidewalks, because there are all of the things you all have said, like North Hill Drive. I'm surprised at how many there are not sidewalks in the Crocker Industrial Park. It breaks my heart to try and watch kids walk to school up San Bruno from Bayshore, let alone Bayshore Boulevard. There's no sidewalk, but walk up it, and it's this teeny itty bitty strip of asphalt. It's not even a sidewalk. So I think we need to do a proper citywide audit of sidewalks and sidewalk installation, sidewalk maintenance, repairs, tree vegetation removal, maintenance. I know I've walked with Tomas and Maz on San Bruno, but I think I just can expand. And also installing better crosswalk alerts, whether that be blinking lights on, you're approaching school, or, just have a full, well-rounded sidewalk route audit and survey, and then implementation. And then also looking at the truck route survey and really considering Park Lane, or whatever park this street is over here and removing that median. And if that can create a route of exit for commercial trucks that are coming in on Old County Road, I'd really love to see that done. So that way that can hopefully reduce truck traffic going up Visitacion, coming through the neighborhood, and then back down San Bruno, or however they do it. And then I'd like to see a bike safety audit done citywide, just to see where we've got bike parking, where we've got routes, where we could include that. And also, I presume Commander Garcia will be there at the meeting as well. He was last year. But we can talk about, what's being seen on the blotter. I never look at it. So what kind of accidents are happening and how we can plan for those. So those are just high level for me. Yeah.
One last thing. And I've thought about it for a long time, but I thought about, we have you, Maz, and others now in the city, and I look forward to new opportunities. And when we talk about grants, I've always been concerned about the safety for the preschoolers on San Bruno Avenue and Glen Park. The fact that there's no concrete wall that could prevent a vehicle. And I've seen some pretty close calls with people at Glen Park and San Bruno Avenue over the years. And I've often thought that, that preschool seems like it's always going to, like it's there. It's kind of like permanent home. and there's a lot of kids. The only thing that's separating them and the street is a chain link fence and a couple pine tree stumps. So I thought maybe if we could get a wall built on that corner, one of those barrier walls to protect that yard a little bit better.
We did, Tomas and I did walk that way, where we spent a lot of time in that intersection actually about various things. So that is on the conversation already. So,
Oh, the
Yeah.
safety of that yard?
yeah, because
Oh.
it's not just the preschoolers in the morning, it's after school. There's
Well, yeah,
the
I mean,
elementary
all,
kids, it's-
all, yeah.
throughout the day too. So,
Okay, thank you. I didn't know.
All right, anyone else for anything? So we are, Paul and I and Miles and Tomas are prepared for the meeting in probably beginning of February.
Any status on the light on Bayshore and San Bruno? I think that was supposed to be on the works.
Okay, well, the original grant we applied for, the Highway Safety Improvement Program grant, it was rejected. So we're looking for other grant opportunities. One of them being maybe the Cycle 4 of the One Bay Area grant, which is a regional grant that essentially one of the components of it is addressing connectivity in the entire region. So that's another potential grant opportunity. But as far as what happened with that application, it was denied because it's interesting doing these grant applications, but because there weren't enough crashes and fatalities, they deny the grant, if that makes sense. They have a scoring system based on collisions, and it was low by their standards, so that's why it was denied.
Yeah, I don't think it was a good it wasn't a good fit for that particular grant. But I think we have the data, so we're going to be shopping that around for others.
There was a fatality though.
No, I know, but it's
One more.
Yes, that's
I know,
what,
so
that's what Tomas is saying.
It's
They want more.
Yeah, it's a weird way to say
tough
it,
conversation, but yes.
that particular grant is really focused on high injury network areas. They try to take care of issues in the worst locations, but there are other opportunities that we will definitely look into that fit that location better.
Right, and a lot of the legwork obviously was done with the first grant application, so
Yeah.
we're well equipped for another one.
It's much simpler to repackage that for another call. So yeah, that we're going to work on that. The TA actually reached out to us, and Tomas is working on a response on some projects that we are considering, so that they know what we want to do as far as and they're asking all the jurisdictions. So a lot of the safety improvements that we've talked about here tonight, a lot of this project that we didn't get the grant for, those are all things that Tomas is putting on their radar.
All right. Any staff updates?
Yeah, I have a couple. The Klamath Street mill and fill, the pavement maintenance between San Bruno and Visitacion Avenue, the bids are due next Wednesday, so we will receive our bids next Wednesday and then choose, depending on the low bidder, once we deem them, responsible and capable of doing the job, that will ultimately go to council, and it takes a couple weeks, and then we have, pre-construction meetings with our contractor, but I would expect construction to begin for that in late February. So again, Klamath Avenue between Visitacion and San Bruno. Monterey Street, we just issued the last meeting I updated you guys. We found a consultant that we selected that we wanted to help us with the design of the pavement maintenance of that street, and we just issued the notice to proceed today. So that just essentially means the clock's ticking for them based on our determined schedule. And yeah, that's all I got.
Any update on the stairs? The wonderful, beautiful art covered stairs?
Yeah, it's moving forward. We're right now. I'm kind of looking. We're looking at end of March for completion. Weather obviously delayed us a little bit, but yeah, we're still moving forward. We're looking at a end of March deadline. Hopefully, we'll get to that point, weather depending. I also wanted to. You want to talk a little bit about the TDA grants that we're.
Oh yeah. So some of the grant opportunities that we were considering for, or you mean for
The one that we're going to go out for to do the bus improvements.
Oh yeah. So this is actually, Emily, this brings up a good point. You had mentioned this yesterday, or not last meeting, I mean, but it was regarding Bayshore and VWR, how we are addressing. We have the grant for the construction in the northbound direction, and then it had actually slipped my mind because Randy had worked on this grant independently, but we do have fun. He applied for the third round of the ACR TDM grants, and we were awarded the grant to do a project in essentially the same scope in the southbound direction. So we will be addressing both Bayshore VWR northbound and Bayshore VWR southbound. And again, that project will include striping improvements, improvements to the traffic signal, ADA improvements, and sidewalk as well. So I can send you guys kind of a schematic drawing of what that might look like, but we will be addressing both directions of that one.
Yeah, we'll be at council at the next Thursday to accept that grant for that southbound portion of it, and then we will go out for an RFP for design for both as one project.
And will that include lighting for those bus stops?
Right. Yeah. Of course. Once this came up, I was like, perfect. We are adjusting those stuff. So. Yeah. Oh, and one more regarding all that the quick build project on Old County Road. The contractor, like many, were off the last 2 weeks of December for the holidays, and we just got word today that he expects the quote by the end of the week, and he could start work as soon as next week. So,
Any update on the extension of the striping on Old County Road? Is that what you're talking about?
yeah, so that'll be the extended red curb, the moved extending the red curb, adding signage, and removing some signage that's there, and. Yeah.
And shifting the loading zone.
Right. Yeah, I think that's it.
Any update on the other one that, shoot, I forgot who asked me to approve it, but before the break, before the holiday, someone asked me if the committee would support the grant for the.
Oh, that's for the Quarry Road.
Yeah, thank you.
The Quarry Trail project. I think we submitted in late December. The letter of intent was submitted to MTC. We're waiting to hear back. We expect to hear something back, I think, by the end of February, if not sooner. And then it's interesting. So the letter of intent was much more like a grant application, but it's not a formal application. So we'll get feedback from them on by February, and then we have to actually turn around and submit an actual grant application afterwards. So as soon as we hear back, we will share more information on that.
Can part of that, when I'm presuming we get submit the grant application, can we coordinate with the Art Commission committee and make some of that stuff like lighting and benches more artistic?
We can talk about that. I think this grant application itself was more about the vegetation and removing some of the invasive species and planting more native species, as well as addressing some of the stormwater and drainage concerns. But I think we can talk about trying to incorporate lighting and making that more of an inviting space long term. Yeah, I mean, so we can certainly look at that. If we make it artistic, yes, that kind of does open up that particular pot. We can bring that up in a conversation. I mean, that actually might not be a bad thing to discuss at the liaison meeting.
Okay. Anybody else think of anything that the staff has told us about wonderful things they're working on that I haven't remembered? No? Okay. Any chair or committee member matters that you want to bring agendized for next meeting?
I do. I'm just curious about, I brought this up when we had the transportation people here regarding the potholes. The one that, as you were approaching the off-ramp for Brisbane, has been filled with some blacktop, temporary patch. But as you're coming off the overpass, there's the pothole. Right as you come off the overpass, it's a pretty good pothole.
Onto Bayshore?
On the Bayshore, off of 101.
Yeah.
Also, as you're heading south on Bayshore, in the left lane, if you're going to get on southbound 101, there's a pothole that's, they're sizable enough to cause damage when you're driving, 45 miles, or there it's 40 miles an hour. But I brought it up when the transportation people were here, and I thought about the potholes on the overpass, the one as you come off the overpass and the one before the overpass, as well as the vegetation that at one point as you're taking the exit for the overpass, if there's a car that's stalled in that turn as you're coming onto the overpass, you wouldn't see a smaller car stalled right there. And over the years, there have been cars that were stalled there. And so my comment was that the vegetation there, as well as you're coming off the overpass onto Bay Shore, the vegetation prohibits you from seeing bicyclists that are starting to approach the lane that you're coming into, as well as vehicles that are broken down on the right-hand side as you come off the overpass, which has happened many times before, and you can't see them until you're trying to avoid that pothole as you're coming off the overpass. And I only bring all this up because many years ago, a woman and her daughter lost their lives out on Bay Shore because of something that should have been done, that I had brought up and was never addressed. This was many years ago. She was a examiner photographer, if you just Google that. She went to pick her daughter up to go do the dog show, and something very easily could have been done by a phone call. And I won't mention any names to the people that were involved at the time, but I never forgot that. And they could have made a phone call, and it didn't happen. And because of that, granted, it was an accident or determined to be negligence by another driver, but the fact that this situation was happening caused this situation to happen. So I brought up that thing about the vegetation because I thought I was really clear as to the dangers that they pose. And my question is not why it wasn't done. It's like who drives by and says, "Oh, that's not cool. That needs to be cleaned up." And that's Caltrans, and get right on the phone and call Caltrans and say, "Hey, can you cut that vegetation off the overpass? Can you cut that vegetation as it approaches Bay Shore? Well, when they do that kind of stuff, that's when they do the paving, right? Because they shut down the overpass to be able to do that, like at midnight. And that's when they can, instead of putting cutback, which is the temporary patch that they put in potholes, they could pave it. So I just want to be, I'm a little disappointed that when we have the transportation people here, the ones of the ultimate authority, you'd think they would have looked at that and said, "Hey, whose area is that up there in Brisbane on the overpass, and who does the vegetation management, who does the making sure that it's safe right there, who's checking for the potholes?" So if we can check on that and see if they have some type of maintenance type of oversight, I would appreciate that, because I have put in just like I was talking to, I want to talk to you later about the overpass in Pacifica, but things like that, things that are pose a hidden threat. Thank you.
I think short question is, Tomas Maz, can you tell us who we need to contact about getting that cleaned up? Is that Bay Shore Boulevard? Is that a Brisbane maintenance issue?
Yeah, so the large pothole as you're getting as you merging onto the Bay Shore Boulevard from the off ramp from 101, that's actually on our list. Tomas actually is working on getting a contractor out to do that. That's part of our responsibility. It's one of the first things that I noticed driving into town before I even started. So thank you for bringing that up. We are gonna go and do a hot mix asphalt repair because the cold patch is not holding up. The challenge with that was the traffic control, because it's a pretty, as you know, it's a pretty busy thoroughfare. So, but we've got that on the list. I think we're trying to get. I think the purchase order just got approved, so we're gonna get that scheduled soon. As well as taking care of some of the other larger potholes and kind of that Bay Shore corridor.
If I may, I knew about that pothole that was on your list. That's the one that's just down from that plate. I'm talking about right as you come off the concrete part of the overpass, the bridge, onto asphalt. There's that pothole.
So that if it's, I think that one I believe is on the this Caltrain system.
And that's
So
what I was getting at.
I got you. So what I can do is we can share that. But if you go to if you Google customer service request Caltrans District 4, it'll take you to a website, and you can geolocate the specific location, and you can submit a request for service. I can share that link with this group if you guys are interested. I use it all the time, not just at work, but also privately. And I think I'm on Caltrans list.
Blacklist.
They've got me on their blacklist. But every time, I don't get the automated responses anymore. They know better. I actually get real responses for them. They see my name. It's pretty unique. So, but yeah, that's actually a good way. It's that's the best way they track those types of service requests. If you call them or email them, it gets lost in their system. If you put in that log, they will respond one way or the other. Even if you don't get what you want, at least there's a tracker for it. And there's been times where I had to submit it a couple of times. Then somebody finally responds to me, and we get some traction. So I'm happy to share that. But it's a customer service request, Caltrans District 4. If you type that into a Google search, you'll find it.
Who's also responsible for the trees on Bay Shore Boulevard? Because what he's talking about, you can't, you come around that curve off the overpass. There's trees. You cannot see the cars on the other side. You cannot see the bicyclists, even though there's that bike lane and then those.
I'll take a closer look at the right-of-way maps. When you get close to those transition points, it's not very clear whose responsibility it is. Let me take a closer look at that. If it's the city's responsibility, we will move forward with some trimming of it. If it's not, then we can submit that service request.
The issue with that is that's in South City.
Is it?
Yeah. And I wasn't sure where our sphere of influence when it comes to Bayshore, where we actually agree to maintain. But
Do you have any trimmers? Because midnight's coming soon.
No, I mean the other thing is I do have I know the public works director in South City, so I can also reach out to them.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
All right. Next meeting is February 4th, unless Tomas advises otherwise, to move to accommodate library and community.
Right, yeah. I
gathering.
expect it'll be a correspondence-heavy month, just keeping you guys posted on what the plan is. But yeah.
All right, thanks. Anyone else have anything else? Otherwise, we're going to adjourn. Nope. All right, we're adjourning at 8:17 p.m. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
thank you.
Happy New Year.